Tabitha Scott, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks, John. I'm so glad to be here.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Boulder, Colorado. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about rethinking change management. I love this topic. I'm a university professor. I research in this space. I consult in this space. I teach change management courses. This is something I think a lot about and I love talking about. And the reality is the landscape of change management has shifted dramatically over the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And frankly, the old school kind of approach to systemic change management is shifting a lot, and we're in a day and an age where we just need to be ready for constant change. And so I'm really excited to talk with you about your book and about recent work that you've been working on in relation to this idea of rethinking change management and really just adapting our approach. As we get started, I wanted to share Tabitha's bio with everybody. Tabitha Scott is a recognized thought leader, innovator, public speaker, and a 2023 Forbes Business Council contributor. She specializes in harnessing human dynamics for sustainable business success and is a best-selling author. Currently, she advises on engagement, innovation, and leadership for major organizations. Tabitha has spearheaded IT strategy during a record expansion phase for a Fortune 400 firm and has held roles as CEO of Cole Scott Group and military assistance company, as well as senior vice president of innovation and sustainability at Balfour Beatty Investments and Lease Americas, leading significant business shifts. Renowned for applying energy science to boost organizational innovation and productivity, Tabitha was instrumental in forming the world's largest solar-powered community, earning White House recognition for her tech advancements. She is a prolific author with contributions to top publications covering energy, behavioral change, and burnout prevention. I've only just scratched the surface. There's a whole lot more I could say, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
No, that I think that sums it up pretty well. I think if I had to describe myself in one word, it would be energy, because
Hmm.
looking at how people move, human dynamics, how change happens, how companies are born and grow and go through the life cycles and then retire. And, this concept of regeneration and circularity, I think with a background in both the financial side of business and the energy engineering side, once you understand how energy moves, you can't unsee it. So I'm really
Hmm.
excited to talk to you about change management today.
Yeah, well, I really like that the regeneration concept that you just mentioned, and looking at change management from this energy perspective. That's not something I've ever really thought about before. But your background suits you to this framing, this lens. Can you speak a little bit more to that, and then we'll dive on in further.
Yeah, absolutely. Energy is really everything, isn't it? We're made of energy. Every human, everything on the earth is made of energy. And so when you speak of things like potential, it's really your potential energy. It's your potential to unleash things that already exist. And so if you think about change management from an energetic perspective, Einstein said energy is never created or destroyed, it just changes forms. And so you
Hmm.
want to align people's personal passion or purpose, things that energize them, things that get their vibe high, with where you want your organization to go. Otherwise, you'll get an equal and opposite reaction when you try to create change. You'll get, oh, I don't have time, I don't have budget. And so all of these laws of motion and physics and the laws that are found in nature can help us govern any business problem that we have, because nature has been evolving for 4 billion years, modern industry about 300. So we have a lot to
Right.
learn from the laws of movement and nature and science.
Well, I love that. I love applying natural science principles to the social sciences and organizational sciences. Fantastic. I love that. All right. So as we start to, jump into this broader change management topic, I know, again, as I said on the outset, you do a lot of work in this space. You've worked with organizations for a long time, both on the inside as an executive, but also now externally as you speak and as you are a thought leader and as you work with organizations. Um, how would you describe the landscape currently, and how have you seen it shift, say, over the last decade or two?
Yeah, I think I would describe the biggest shift is the acceleration in the adoption of change. If
Hmm.
you look at the entire year of 2000, the pace of technological change during that year is now replicated every 30 minutes. The technology we have in our phones that we hold in our hands is more than the technology that they had when they landed the first craft on the moon. And so that technological change is happening at a pace that our human brains can't evolve to quickly enough.
Mm.
And so, in my opinion, change management is a myth. So, I'm going to push back that it's even possible in the traditional sense, when traditionally we had linear change, right? You
Yeah.
remember the days of business where they drew the hockey stick and it just went
Hmm.
up and up, and your goal in your business meetings was just to get the budget and get things back to that predictable linear growth. And now it's chaos theory is the math. It's a different math that you're dealing with now. And you have things like social science, 24/7 internet access, AI. You have all of this accessibility that's instant. You can't control things like you used to be able to control a message that gets to the public or things like that. So we're living in a completely different environment. And so to think that we could manage change in the same way is just kind of crazy, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This whole idea of linear change management is long, long gone.
Yeah.
So the old change management textbooks are so completely obsolete, and we have these old change models, that people still talk about and people still try to apply. And as frameworks, generally speaking, maybe there's some value still there, but in terms of actual application in the real world day to day, no. I mean, you're right. Like we're in an environment where change is constant, change is rapid, and look no further than, I mean, certainly today, you can look just today, but like everyone can wrap their minds around this example of just COVID, So go back
Yep.
in time to March of 2020, and how the whole world turned upside down on, the top of, the head of a needle, right?
Right.
And everything changed immediately.
Yeah.
Nobody saw it coming, and nobody had a choice. Like literally
Right.
everything changed for everybody immediately. And well, maybe we're not experiencing that level of traumatic
Mhm.
change constantly. We're kind of close. I mean, we're
Yeah.
we're we're experiencing pretty close dramatic change constantly, in this modern era, in part driven by technological shifts, in part geopolitical, socioeconomic shifts.
Mhm.
Certainly, there's just, shifts in the nature of work and labor force dynamics. And like there's all these different things, right, contributing to
Yeah.
it. And so the reality is, certainly the old cycles of change are completely obsolete.
Right.
And the old linear path and the old linear models of change are completely obsolete. And so
Yeah.
what we need to do is be able to adopt kind of this continual learning mindset, this continual readiness mindset, and an ability to, um, you know, to continually be to be in a place of just embracing, maybe just embracing ambiguity, embracing
Yeah.
complexity, and to your point, that's not what we were built for evolutionarily
Right.
speaking.
Right. The levers have all changed. You
Yeah.
used to have like financial levers. This one lever will be pulled. We'll change interest rates. We're going to change
Hmm.
Fed rates. We're going to look at different levers throughout our economy. And now it is a Wild West. I was reading about Trump's coin, and how
Hmm.
millions of dollars, he issues a coin, he deletes the pennies. Like never before have we had someone in the White House who's creating their own currency and changing US currency at the same time. And this is not a pro or con to that. It's an observation that we've never had this kind of rapid fire change, and people don't understand what to latch onto, what's real, what's not real. And we have all of these 24/7 news cycles feeding us different things based on what we choose, like, what we comment on. We're reading completely different information. And so one of the constructs that I talk about in a recent book, Powering Change, is to look at nature for these answers. I have
Mm.
this opposite view of nature, like it's not save the poor planet, woe is me. It's the planet is a badass and we should be learning from it. You know, it has these constructs that have evolved for billions of years, like the growth cycle. And
Okay,
so I
could I just
talk about,
comment for just a second?
yeah, yeah,
Because you're right. Like we talk about, climate change, we talk about all these impacts. The reality is we're talking about it in terms of the impact on us humans.
right.
The planet's going to go on. Like
Yeah, yeah,
the
it'll
planet's
be
fine.
fine.
The
Nobody
planet's
needs
going
to
to be
save
fine.
the
It's just about how
planet.
it impacts us, right?
We just need to save the dumb humans on it. That's all. Yeah, and so that growth cycle, you know, it seems common sense when you're talking to a farmer. You plant your crop in the spring, you harvest it in the fall, and then you use the winter for planting, you know, and or thinking about what am I going to do the next year and budgeting that out and preparing. And yet in our businesses, we don't always align the executive that we choose or the people that we place in positions based on how they're energized. So
Yeah.
we could use Southwest Airlines, for example, where you had one very risk averse leader that took on that organization as it scaled up. That was the perfect person to streamline, you know, its operations. But then, whenever it got to the mature phase and was declining, you needed a disruptor. You needed somebody like a Steve Jobs to come in and freshen technology and, you know, freshen it up and leap onto the next growth curve. But what they did was hire someone just like him who was even more conservative. You know, he had come up in the same ranks at Southwest for something like 30 years, you know, in a compliance driven accounting role, which he would have been great to further refine it. But because they were so focused on efficiencies, there was no investment in technology. And you probably remember a couple years ago, everybody was dead in the water around the holidays because Southwest
Yeah.
was not prepared. They hadn't been listening to their tech people, they hadn't been listening to operations. They were so busy refining. And if you think about hiring the right person at the right time, you had Steve Jobs, you know, got the curve started. And then you had Steve Wozniak that took it, you know, as more of a I'm going to refine this tool, you know, over time. And so it's getting the right butt in the right seat based on change. There is no one size fits all leader in a non-linear economy. It can't happen. You have to focus on where is this company in its growth curve and what type of leadership team do I need?
Yeah, yeah. And that Southwest example is a really good one. The Apple example is a really good one. Yeah, I think everyone remembers the disaster that was the holiday travel with Southwest, and the ripple effects of that. And that's the thing is it was totally avoidable. But it, it obviously it wasn't avoided because of a whole bunch of decisions that
Yeah,
were made over an extended period of time. Um, and we find ourselves in those situations all the time, right? Organizations find themselves in those situations, and it's to your point earlier, it's human nature.
yeah,
It's human nature for us to choose people for positions who are like us,
yeah,
right? So it's no surprise that Southwest replaced their prior CEO with another CEO that was similar.
mhm.
That's in fact, it's entirely predictable.
Yeah, we've done
In
well,
fact, you'd
so
be
let's keep doing what we're doing,
yeah.
you
In
know?
fact, it would almost be surprising if they did something different.
Right, right.
Um, now there are examples of where forward-thinking boards, forward-thinking leaders do
Hmm.
understand this and they
Yeah,
do understand the necessity and they do make those wise strategic shifts over time.
yeah,
But again, human nature, and more often than not, we tend to choose people who are like us. We tend to choose people, we tend to choose our replacement based on, who we are and who we think will replicate us.
yeah,
And that is just usually a recipe for failure.
it
Um,
is.
and and it's again this evolutionary kind of mechanism within our heads about like how we were able to survive in the past and what allowed us to survive 100,000 years ago as humans versus let's fast forward to the industrial revolution industry 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. We're in industry 4.0 now. Like it's not even remotely the same today
Right.
as it was even a generation ago, in terms of like the type of leadership, the type of organization, that the way work is designed, the way work is structured, and the way we need it to be able to move forward in an agile, rapid adaptation kind of mode.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to make decisions based on what worked, even a decade ago, you might get lucky, but probably it's going to come back to bite you. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, and the other challenge here is, of course, we don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know. None of us know, and none of us, can truly, and none of us really know what's going to happen, and all we can do is our best guess. But basing our decisions on what worked previously and just replicating what we did previously is almost always going to be a recipe for disaster.
Right. It will. And it's you raise an interesting point. It's the executive roles and it's the whole team. Like thinking about nature, if you have fires have gone on forever and in the history of time, and the natural landscape of fields or forests are very diverse. And so they're very resilient in how they come back. And if you
Mm-hmm.
look at that leadership team, you would want your marketing and salespeople probably at the beginning of the growth curve. They're always thinking about the future, what's next. You might want your COO somewhere in the middle of that growth curve where they can execute. They can work with the risk averse people who you want accounting, compliance, legal, and they can work with the marketing people that are kind of moving, but they are the middle ground that gets the operations, going. And then your CEO, depending what your company needs. You always have to be thinking about what phase is next of those four phases. And that's your roadmap and strategy and planning. Whether you're in tech, operations, it doesn't matter. It's always going to follow the same curve because we're all made of energy. And that's the growth cycle of nature. You can't escape it. You can use it as a tool to help for planning, but you sure as heck can't take change and just look at what the status quo is now and look to the past. What's more, that's what companies do now is they look at their past performance only and the current state. That doesn't work. It just doesn't work
And it's
anymore.
it's hard because the old adage is that, the best predictor of future performance is past performance. Like I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many times I've heard that adage, right? And there's some logic and there's some wisdom to that. And if you're talking about individuals, if I'm
Mhm.
talking about like a team member and I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out like, is this team member going to perform into the future? How do I predict what they're going to do? There's some wisdom to that. But like
Yeah.
if we're talking about, a firm, an organization, if we're talking about a leader in their ability to perform within a complex environment, um, yeah, you kind of almost have to throw that out the window.
You do.
And that's hard because people have had that, hammered home in them time and time and time again.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and we live in a world where it's interesting because especially like in the United States, in the West, we're highly individualistic. We're highly, we have this mix of like compliance orientation slash risk aversion, complemented with entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. And these things, there's a great tension, right?
Mhm.
And depend, like you said many times, like the depending on the life cycle, depending on the stage of the organization, depending on the external environment, like you could find yourself in a dramatically different place
Yeah.
of where you kind of need to be or should be.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's no textbook here. There's no like clear, easy answer. And that's
Yeah.
the thing is most people want a clear, easy answer.
Yeah.
They want to be told like, okay, what should we do? What's the next step? They want the linear, I guess, to come
They
back to
do.
what we
They
were
do.
talking
They
about at the
do.
beginning. They want the linear, and the problem is there's very little linear in this world. And yet that's what we continue to come back to.
We do, but I think that's because the human brain thinks that it has to separate itself from the laws of nature to be creative or to be innovative. And I would challenge that. And through the lens of energy, the roadmaps are all there already, because if you understand what energizes you as a person, we are highly predictable. Humans are
Mm,
very, very predictable. If we are energized by something, then we will do it. It's those moments where you forget to, oh my gosh, it's 3 o'clock. I forgot to have lunch. When was the last time you did that? And what were you doing? Where you might find yourself subconsciously humming, or you might get goosebumps. You're so excited about something. Like, what are those moments and what are you doing? Those are the things that energize you or raise your vibe. So you're going to be more productive. It's just common, it's just sense, right? Whereas if it drains you, like if you take someone like me who's wired at the tip of the curve, love startup, big ideas into the future, and for long periods of time, if I am doing tedious, detail-oriented client, compliance-driven work that everything has to fit in a perfect box, I'll get burned out. Now, I could do it. I've had to pass my exams and, all of the things that we have to do to have professional certifications, but it doesn't energize me. And so what happens is it causes burnout when you stretch people too far away from how they're naturally energized. It's like if you have a really warm cup of coffee and you're in your happy place and somebody plops an ice cube in it, it's just a matter of time before the coffee gets cold and you don't want to drink it anymore. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
any kind of change that you want to enact, think about it from a physics. How would energy behave? For example, I've got this great new idea. If you say that to someone at the beginning of the growth curve who's energized by new ideas and creativity, they're going to love it. If you say that to someone who's energized by finding risk and killing it, then they're not going to like it. So you would never say that to them. If you want them to do something, if you want them to adopt an idea, put it in their language first. Wow, we can really avoid risk if we start doing X. We're behind. So it's the same request, but in a different language that will energize whoever you're talking to. And so it would be predictable if I said, I've got a great new idea and I'm talking to legal and compliance, that they're immediately going to put their hands up and go, wait a minute, don't
Mm-hmm.
do it yet. And rather find where the person wants to go, an object in motion already.
Yeah.
You add that same amount of energy behind it. Now, look what happens. You both accelerate. So I would argue that the predictability of managing change is really in nature already. We're just trying to get away from it and, rationalize it with our human brains. Whereas just look around in nature. All the answers are there already. We just got to pay attention.
I love it. I love the framing. I love the perspective. Tabitha, it has just been a real pleasure. I note the time. I need to let you go here in just a minute. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Thank you, John. I so appreciate being here and love your podcast. People can find me at tabithaascott.com or check me out on LinkedIn. If you want to see the content and the things that I'm working with now, you can go to on LinkedIn, Tabitha A. Scott, and I'd love to hear from you. If others have questions and things, my books, Powering Change and Trust Your Animal Instincts, talk about how you can use your own energy to lead organizations and to keep yourself recharged.
Wonderful. Tabitha, again, thank you so much. I encourage the audience to reach out to get connected, find out more about what Tabitha can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great